On this episode of WNIN Newsmakers, we'll talk to Executive Director of TalentEVV, Tyler Stock, about the recently released annual report. Welcome to WNIN Newsmakers. I'm Jessica Costello, evening anchor for Eyewitness News. Today we'll learn more about the overall job outlook for our region, and Tyler Stock, Executive Director of TalentEVV, is here with us now, and thank you, Tyler, for joining us.
Yeah, thank you, Jessica. I appreciate that.
TalentEVV, something that maybe people haven't heard about and they want to learn more about, but it's something obviously that you hear if you're involved in the community. So walk us through what it is, and to the average person, how can you explain that?
Yeah, absolutely. So TalentEVV is our region's strategic plan to move forward and transform the Evansville region. So this work really started back in 2018. A group of business leaders, nonprofit organizations, and other community stakeholders really came together to say, what are the things that are going to differentiate our region from others, and how do we stack up against other regions that are similar in size to us, similar in industry makeup, for us to better understand how do we attract future residents and also keep the folks that are already living here and make the Evansville region a desirable place to live. So back in 2018, this work started as a data project to understand how we stack up, and quickly turned into a regional transformation strategy focused on 4 key focus areas: population growth, thriving workforce, upward mobility, and living well. And behind those, there are some key indicators that we really watch every single year to understand how are we improving year over end, and how do we continue to stack up against those other benchmark communities that we've outlined. So.
Definitely going to ask you about those 4 areas. There's a lot to unpack with just that one answer, but let's first go over what's the region that TalentEVV covers and looks at when you're collecting all this data?
Yeah, so it truly is the tri-state region, but we focused in on 5 key counties, so Vandenberg, Warwick, Posey, Gibson, and Henderson. When you really look at the labor shed and understand where people are moving and commuting throughout our region, those 5 counties really are kind of the central point of where that activity happens. And those counties were picked specifically so we could better understand how are we influencing the labor market, but also how are we influencing quality of life, both from the Indiana side, but also from the Kentucky side as well.
Absolutely. And you mentioned these 4 focus areas, and I want to go over each one. So I'm sure this will be a long-winded answer, but if you can go over those 4 areas and what they actually mean, I think that'll be the most helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of in order, population growth is really looking at bringing 10,000 new residents into our community. Half of those, so 5,000 of those individuals being in early stage career. So we really articulate that as anyone from the age group of 25 to 34. And of course, we want any and all residents to come to this region, but we want to target those in the early stage career, knowing that they've got a long runway with their occupation and have an opportunity to grow and build a family here as well. When you look at thriving workforce, there are kind of 2 key indicators in that space. So the first is jobs and wage growth. So we want to increase economic prosperity in our region. So we want to grow wages by $5,000, and we want to increase the average high-skilled jobs by 5,000 as well. And then on the other side of that is educational attainment. So we're looking specifically at increasing high school graduation rates and post-secondary attainment. So we really understand and looked at those indicators and thought about, how do they come together, right? When you think about jobs and wages, those are directly aligned with the education and educational attainment that you might receive. So making sure that we're really looking at those things together was an important aspect of how we kind of crafted that thriving workforce area.
Absolutely, and there's more.
Yeah, absolutely. So Live Well is really about improving health outcomes. So when you look at a health index, that really means a multitude of different indicators. So think about obesity, think about smoking rates, think about infant mortality or mother and baby outcomes. Think about walkability. So that index is really made up of about 7 different indicators and really helps us understand how do we benchmark against other communities across the United States, right? And it's really looking at the CDC places, and it takes that information and really creates that index or that baseline. And what we find is we are kind of below that baseline, so really trying to improve the health outcomes of both our current and future residents. And then upward mobility is really around reducing poverty, and poverty is directly related to income. So if income goes up, ideally poverty goes down, and I think folks that are in this space that understand poverty reduction strategies would recognize that those two things don't act exclusive from other aspects of an individual or a family, but we really are tracking both the poverty rate and income very closely to understand how we're improving economic prosperity for individuals and families.
I want to go over something you mentioned a little earlier on when we're talking about bringing 10,000 new residents to our region. That sounds like a task in itself. So what goes into attracting maybe a younger generation, or like you said, somebody or people that are in their early stages of their career? What goes into that? There's got to be a lot of behind the scenes work.
Oh yeah, so I think the first thing I'll note is that to bring 10,000 people to a community is not something that one organization or one entity can really be responsible for, right? It really is a community effort. It's an effort of how do we advance the quality of life for our neighborhoods and our schools and our families. But I think for us at EREP and for TalentEVV specifically, we want to look at the things that we can influence. So what we've done over the past really 18 months is stood up the E is for Everyone campaign, and that's relaunching kind of our local identity, right? So we recognize to bring more young people and more people into the Evansville region, they have to be able to understand what's the identity of the Evansville region before they may be attracted to the community, right? So that E is for Everyone campaign is really a critical piece of how we believe population growth can start to happen across the Evansville region. Of course, again, there's not a silver bullet here, but I think creating that regional identity and just being able to measure who's coming in and out of your region in a meaningful way is really important to trying to move the needle in that space. But I mean, you can point to housing developments, you can point to new water and sewer utility infrastructure, all kind of leading us towards the ability and the opportunity to bring new families and individuals into the region. So,
when you talk about all these goals, you know, and you even just said it when we're talking about those 10,000 people, one organization cannot be responsible for a task like that. How important is it, not just for that particular thing, but how important is it to, you know, have these strong partnerships, whether you're working with your hospitals or when you're trying to address homelessness, you're talking with Aurora and organizations like that, in schools, Ivy Tech? What does that mean, and how important are those partnerships?
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And I think when we look at, we being EREP and the folks that are working on TalentEVV, look at other regions within the state of Indiana, what we find is there's a lot of territorialness and maybe stepping on each other's toes. Mm-hmm. When you look at the Evansville region, you don't find that, right? You find really great collaboration between business, nonprofit, and community, right? So it really takes our municipalities, our counties, our elected officials, individuals and families to really understand and have common goals, right? So we hope and believe that TalentEVV is helping to create some common goals there that allow us to really bring more organizations into the fold, right? So specifically for the report that we released, on the back page, it says, made happen by all of us, right? And we use that language specifically because it really does take every single community and neighborhood and municipality to really make that change, right? What flourishing means for Boonville, Indiana means something drastically different for what flourishing means to Evansville. And I think it's our job as a facilitator in that space to help every single community reach their endpoint or their aspirational goal, right? So it really is meeting people and communities where they are.
Absolutely, and that annual report is what we're focusing on here, and there's a lot of great information in it if viewers at home haven't seen it. But what are some of those community achievements that are highlighted in there? Because I feel like that is something that the average person would want to take away and hear about.
Yeah, well, and I think first and foremost, like, this is the first annual report we've ever done in this space. So I think I'd be remiss to say that there are likely achievements and accomplishments in this report. But there are also so many that happened that we couldn't even capture within this report. So I think I'm happy to pull out a few, but really it is everything in the community that's happening that advances us. But I think pointing to a few different ones in there, and it's going to kind of take us on an interesting road of different types of accomplishments. But the first is the Wall Street Journal recognized the Evansville region as the third best city in the United States for a remote worker to live in, right? So if you think about quality of life and quality of place, that really speaks volumes. A remote worker is not someone that's connected to a company culture in an office setting, so they have to be finding that quality of life outside of the office. So I think that's a really unique accolade that we saw happen in 2023. Another is the Met's microtransit program. So this is the first on-demand transit or transportation program that our region has really ever seen. So again, just another step in thinking about how is our region different and better than others out there. If you look at the data, we're reducing poverty at a faster rate than our 9 other peer and aspirational communities. So I think it's significant to say that both nonprofit organizations and cities and counties are prioritizing their people and the outcomes of their people. So I think that's a really exciting piece that you'll find in this report. And then I think we were named one of 3 regions in Indiana that stood up a modern youth apprenticeship. So if we think about how high school students have access to work-based learning and experiences within the employer setting before graduation, that's something that we're doing better than many other regions across the state of Indiana as well. So there are a lot of great nuggets in here. But again, no possible way to capture all of the great things that the Evansville region has done over the last 12 months. So
one that stuck out to me, just as someone that finds this a little valuable, obviously, I'm sure you would agree, is Breeze Airways was another added airline to the airport that we have here, luckily in Evansville. So, I mean, I know there's more work to be done there. I'm sure there's a lot of airlines and connections and flights that everybody wants, but just for that addition, it's a big step.
Yeah, no, I think that you hit the nail on the head. Anytime we bring new air service back to the region, that's a huge accomplishment. I think great kudos to our regional airport here. They've done a great job and really, keeping their shoulder to the wheel and making sure that their constituents are heard and they're addressing that in the appropriate way. I also think that the work that the business community and nonprofit community has come together to work with the state of Indiana to prioritize this has been vitally important. I think the state now more than ever recognizes air service as being a critical component to population growth, not just from a leisure standpoint with the Breeze announcement, but also any future air service that's brought back for business locations. So you name it, Houston, Chicago, Detroit, all of these are locations that we, as a business community, would love to see come back to our market at some point.
Let's move back to that live well area. When we're talking about health, obviously that is a huge factor in everybody's lives. What would you say the strengths and weaknesses maybe are in health within our region?
Yeah, so of course, we'll start with strengths. I think our region is very well positioned as it relates to access to trails and walkability. That may come to us as a surprise to some folks, but if you look at other communities like ours, we are extremely walkable. We have great infrastructure within our center city that folks can walk and get to different areas of the city. And then we also have a great trail system. So I think back in late December, the governor announced a $2 million grant award to the Evansville Trails Coalition that really looks at extending the Roberts Park Trail. So that goes from the Walnut Corridor through Van Park into the State Hospital Park and then across the Lloyd over into Wesselman Woods as well. So I think our strength is connectivity and trails. I think on the weaknesses side, we still have some ground to make up as it relates to smoking, obesity, and mother-baby outcomes. I think we have a disproportionate amount of infant mortalities here in the Evansville region, so that's something that I know our health department is working really hard on right now to not just address that challenge, but to address kind of the preventative nature of that, so education and programming that hopefully helps to reverse that trend before we get to a place where we're kind of measuring the outcome of that. So the weakness there is probably those three categories, I would say.
Now, when we're talking about that annual report, is there anywhere in there that you are maybe talking about the progress of future projects or what's on the horizon for the riverfront or things like that? That's just an example, but are there things in that report that maybe people can flip through and see, okay, this is the progress we're making, this is where we're at, and this is where we're gonna be years down the line?
Not specifically in this report, but later this month, EREP and TalentEVV will be releasing our economic indicator update, which will give the entire community a snapshot at how we've made progress since 2018. So what you'll find in the report is a few different data points that we talk about where we were in 2018 versus where we're at now. At the end of the month, you should have something on our website that really gives you a more holistic picture on how that progress is coming along. I think kind of indirectly to that question, on page 2, we've outlined the number of investments or the investment amount, and it looks like about $75 million ballpark, and that isn't considering match dollars that are associated with some of the grants included in there. So I think it's not too outlandish to say that the investment should drive impact and improvement. Again, a lot's yet to be seen in that space, but I think it's pretty exciting to see so many different people really rallying around these focus areas and how they can advance some of the goals.
Yeah. I want to move back to just growth in our region, and whether we're talking about, that 10,000 number or just keeping growing that number for years to come, whether we get that 10,000 and then we want to add another 10,000, right? We talk about these big partners like Ivy Tech and our hospitals and, our manufacturers around our region, but what about our small businesses? I mean, they've got to play a part too, because when you go downtown, lined with small businesses, and they're very much the heart of our downtown. So walk me through the partnership with our small businesses and how they play a role.
Yeah, so I think I'll answer that question kind of in two parts. So the first is, yes, small businesses and entrepreneurship and innovation are key catalysts to how our region continues to advance. So, I think you pointed out some businesses that we have in downtown, but I also would point to Berry Global. Started out as a very small kind of local manufacturing company, now a global company, the largest plastics manufacturer in the world. I think the same can be said for so many other businesses, so Anchor Industries, Lansing Building Specialties. I mean, we could go on, but I think the value of supporting small businesses is, one, that they make your community extremely vibrant. Everyone wants to pop into a coffee shop or a flower shop or whatever it may be, right? But also on the back end of that is those businesses have an opportunity to continue to grow and have a national or international presence. So I think not underselling the importance of a startup culture and the value of that startup culture is really key to both jobs and wage growth, but also population growth. I think on the other side of that, the Small Business Development Center is actually hosted by EREP. So I think we get a great line of sight to how small businesses can be supported and how we hope that we're fostering that ecosystem in a really meaningful way.
Now there's people like you, there's a whole team behind you as well over at EREP doing this work and trying to attract people and grow our region and pushing these projects forward. But what about the average person, the viewer watching this, a young person that gets to see this on YouTube or something like that, that they play a role in maybe attracting their friends here out of college? How can the average person be that catalyst to bring their friends here or maybe move their family here? What does that look like?
Yeah, I think great question. At the end of the day, it comes down to people, right? And we're all individuals. We all have a personal life that we live aside from our professional life. And I think what you'll see in this report specifically is we've tried to pull out some testimonies of what this work has meant to individuals, right? So I think, twofold, right? We want the average everyday reader of this report and just the resident of the Evansville region to understand what this work means as it relates to the impact on their everyday life. But I think answering your second question is word of mouth, right? At the end of the day, there's nothing more powerful than a personal testimony, or calling someone and being an advocate for an area that you live in, or a neighborhood, or a school, or a company, right? I think that personal testimony goes a really long way. A great example here is we have a remote worker program that we've stood up. We've moved 15 different families into this region with about 30 different people all together. Each of those individuals has a network from where they were living before, be it New York or Florida or California or Georgia, right? We want those individuals to have a really great experience here in the region and then invite their friends and family to move here, right? And I think what we've heard and seen from those remote workers is that this really is a great place to live. And once they get here, it's extremely sticky, right? They love being able to get around the city in 15 to 20 minutes from any side of town. They love all of the great food and restaurant choices, and they love that our downtown is growing and vibrant in comparison to some downtowns that are really struggling to flourish. So I think there's a great story to be told there, and I think it's just about getting more people here and letting them tell that story for themselves.
Tyler, within that annual report, there's testimonials, and you've mentioned it. How did you all go about finding the right people to talk about the region? Because we know that there are mixed responses in terms of how people feel about where they live. There's always going to be a problem or a positive that comes out of it. But to find those testimonials where amazing things come out of the mouths of these people that you are highlighting in there, where does that come from?
Yeah, great question. I think first and foremost, starting with respect, to let these folks know that they're going to be respected and that their story is going to be told in a positive light was really important to the process. And then I think the second piece of that is making sure that you have trust and credibility with who's asking for the testimonial, right? So if you look through the report, we do have some core organizations, so United Way of Southwestern Indiana, Junior Achievement of Southwestern Indiana, the Wellborn Baptist Foundation, and then the Community Foundation Alliance. All of those partners have really great trust and credibility, not just with other nonprofit organizations, but with individuals and residents within the communities that are being served. So we wanted to make sure that the right person was asking for the testimonial, because at the end of the day, we want to respect these individuals and the stories that they're willing or not willing to tell. So that's kind of where we started. And then, of course, just kind of waited for the feedback that we got from those individuals. And then, of course, worked very closely with them to kind of polish it up, right? Because the first round of a testimonial is going to be a little bit, might be a little bit clunky because this person or individual doesn't have a writing background. So that was a little bit on how we went through that process. But it was exciting to see people tell their story, because I think what you see in the report is we've got some really great stories to tell.
Right.
And at the end of the day, like I said earlier, this is about individuals and about the people of this community. So
Absolutely. And we talk about all this work and all the great things that are being done, but funding is probably at the top of the list of how we get all of this done. So how are projects like this and how are initiatives like this funded?
Yeah, and I think to simply answer that question, it's about public-private partnership. At the end of the day, it doesn't happen without corporate partnership, without nonprofit engagement, and without civic engagement, right? So that's really where that conversation starts, and I think you can look specifically to funding enablers like the Promise Neighborhood. So I know that was a $30 million Department of Education grant that was funded to, I believe, 7 different schools and 11 census tracts, and that work directly feeds into the goals of upward mobility, live well, and thriving workforce. And then you can also point to Ready 1.0. So Ready was a program started by the state of Indiana that really tried to infuse capital investment into specific regions around the state. So we were awarded $50 million about 18 months ago. We've expended all $50 million across all 4 of our Indiana counties, and we believe that some really great projects happen from that. So you can point to Promenade Flats on Burkhart, which is a great mixed-use development. You can point to some workforce housing in Princeton for Toyota, for Toyota. It's called The District, so it's about 200 houses. And then you can also point back to Ready 2.0. So the state was so successful in their first round of Ready with the $50 million. They said, let's do it again, right? So we believe we're poised for another great award of a few $1,000,000, and we feel like there's an opportunity to really leverage that public-private investment against that award to really advance the goals of TalentEVV. And at the end of the day, funding enablers become much easier to go after if you have shared and common goals. And I think what you'll see in this report and what you'll see within the TalentEVV strategy is it allows all constituents and parties to really come under one common goal and
Right.
shared initiative to advance a region. So.
Well, before we wrap up, we talked about a lot of data, a lot of things in this annual report that are beneficial to really anybody that's invested in our community. If somebody wants a copy of that or they just want to read through it, where can they find it?
Yeah, so if you want a copy of it, you can go to www.evvregion.com, so that's EREP's website. We have a community vision tab, and it drops down to TalentEVV, and you should be able to go there and download the PDF. And then, of course, folks are always welcome to reach out to me. I'm happy to answer any questions or help your organization or you as an individual get plugged into this work. I believe my email is probably embedded somewhere in that PDF, so folks are definitely welcome to do that. But again, this work doesn't happen without our entire region, so it's really exciting to share the accomplishments, but more important, I think a great acknowledgement of the collaboration that's happening here in the Evansville region.
Perfect. Tyler, thank you so much.
Thank you, Jessica.
Thank you to Tyler Stock for joining us today to help explain the job outlook for our region. Thanks for watching WNIN Newsmakers.